Hello, and welcome to your first tutorial for creating LDAP, an LDAP interface using Java and Maven and Spring. Well, this may not be your first tutorial, but let's see what new techniques we can share. Um, Basically, I will be using Maven to create this project. Let's see, I forgot how to create. Here we go. New project. Um, I installed this Eclipse version just for you. However, you can see there's no projects on the side to distract you. But more importantly, in order to even first attempt to create a Maven project, you must first install Maven, the Maven plugin for Eclipse at least. And this is how this option pops up. So you'll notice that Maven project is here. Create a simple project. You'll want to check this in order to avoid selecting the type of project, as there's over hundreds of them. It takes forever to load. This just gives you a very general preference. I'm sure a lot of you watching this know exactly what that is. But to move on to the group ID and naming conventions, basically what we will do is give our main package name, just give it a, go through the steps, just go through the motions. Okay. Notice that Eclipse gets busy making this little thing on the side. I'm just joking, it's not a theme, but this is your project in entirety. You have your POM here, which is used to build the jar, and you have your source main Java, source main resources, very clean setup. We're going to mess it up pretty soon. So let's get to work on creating our package and making sure that we can run it. LDAP. Okay, so I'm assuming if you found this video, it's most likely because you know what LDAP is, or somebody or your boss told you to look it up. So basically, LDAP is the lightweight directory access protocol program that Linux uses to control who has access to which space, to what space on the Linux FS. There's also different implementations of it. You can have as many LDAP servers on your cluster as you want. If you do have a cluster on a server, even easier to maintain. Basically, there's groups that you can assign to have access to certain directories, and you can monitor who has access to what. Is basically a security protocol on top of the default protocol built on for Linux. Admins will know a lot about it, but as developers, the bridge is beginning to narrow as to what admins must know and what developers must know. Spring allows you to query and bind and unbind members of your LDAP database, so it makes it pretty simple to get started. I didn't have as much respect for it at first. I thought it was actually harder until I was proven wrong when I actually had to implement it. When I did, I saw there were not that many great resources, so hence this video. Let's just make sure we can run. I'm sure we're all familiar with this. I know I'm not the best developer, but I always like to make sure it works before moving on, and to cover ground for those who may be new to Java. Okay, so basically in our main program, we can begin to write or define whatever functions we need. Now, let's say we define LDAP template. Well, this certainly is a class within Spring, but you'll see here that it's not available. And in order to do this, we must respect the Maven structure and not forget our dependencies in the POM. I actually have another project set up. I'm just going to go over and copy the jars. Don't worry, I will not leave you behind. So we will have property. I'm sorry, I know I should have this ready. I just want to show you how quickly you can get started with Spring LDAP. But it may be longer than you had thought. Okay. So there may be newer versions. I may not be using the best ones, but I'm certain these work. Hopefully they work on your version of Eclipse, as I've heard Eclipse can have a mind of its own. So, inexperienced. Moving forward, under the dependencies, you have all the jars that are required. This basically downloads all the jars from the central Maven repository. Therefore, you don't need to declare the repository within this file. If you have your own repository, such as Archiva, you will. However, for these jars, you're just declaring the groups that you require and the versions that you're going to use. For basic functionality, these will surface just fine. The same for Spring. And I always like to use this JSON jar to dissect a Java class. Now we can get started with some somewhat serious coding. So what we're going to be doing is first investigating what it takes to connect to an LDAP server. If I can just find my notes. Okay. And here is my $1 million code. Alright, so now that we included those in the POM file, you will see that I'm just going through these one by one to show you what you can do, or the jar, what the difference between not including the jars in the POM, and whenever you do include them, you'll notice that I could just hover over it. It tells me which class it is. You can actually fix up your code you can fix your dependencies using Control-Shift-O. You'll see that it automatically populated up here. And fix your code using Control-Shift-F. You'll see that it formatted this. It will not format this as I have errors. So let me fix these errors now. Okay. I was fortunate enough to find an LDAP server, a sample LDAP server that you could just use to query for your own needs. I hope these guys know what they're doing, because there's probably going to be a lot of developers hitting this. But besides that, we are going to actually query that as well. Now these aren't super secret credentials or anything like that. You won't need a security clearance for them. But basically what this allows you to do is connect to these guys' LDAP server on port 389 using their base DM. And their healthy password. So let's stop and look at what we have here as of now. Right now, if you actually type this into the web server URL, will probably get address not understood or something like that. But this is allowing us read access to their LDAP server. If we try to bind a new user or a new group, then we would be thrown an error. Now we're manually setting this in our Java code. If you talk to Spring experts, they won't recommend this, as the point of Spring is to minimize configuration within your code. You know, that goes back and forth. People are still using JSPs and JSTLs, so I wouldn't read too much into it. However, it would be best to include it in your source in an XML file if you're going to be using this on a web server. However, for high or dynamic environments that require high availability, it's very necessary to be able to flexibly change your LDAP source, etc. Coming from an admin point of view. So let's query this baby. Let me pull from my query control. So I'm not sure if we've all heard of, which one do you think? All right. I'm not sure if you have ever used Spring or Maven or Java for that matter. However, the important thing to remember is that Spring, when you declare something you declare in an XML file, is always a bean. Usually you have an auto-wired annotation up here, and that's only when you declare them inside of the XML file. However, here, this is just a quick and dirty implementation to show you Spring's flexibility with LDAP. So what I did here, somebody once told me that you can query LDAP exactly the same as MySQL. I laughed as soon as I realized how different they actually are. Basically, I have this AND filter here that you set up, and so as you can see, this is very different from the way you would query MySQL, and it actually requires a class implementation. So to make this easy, as I know the web is moving towards JSON implemented services, you will have to create this class. Okay, so I will again pull from my code if I can find it. So use Control-Shift-O. So what this class does here is that it sends the enumeration of your Spring